Hey there, welcome back to Season 1, Episode 10 of Fascinating Founders. I'm your host, Nicole Holland, and I'm thrilled to be your guide as we dive in and uncover the stories that came before the success of some of the world's most fascinating founders. Hailing from a multitude of industries and socioeconomic starts, you're going to learn what's made these fascinating men and women realize their dreams from an inspired idea to millions in revenue, disrupting, innovating, and impacting humanity for the better. You never know what's going to come up in our casual conversations, so get your notebooks ready, cozy up with a great cup of joe, and join us as I dive in to learn about how these inspiring individuals have figured out how to thrive at a time where most people give up on their dreams. Jimmy Kim is my guest today and is the CEO and co-founder of Sendlane, a cross-channel email marketing automation platform. Over the past 10 plus years as a digital marketer, his need for a reliable platform that understands digital marketers led him to build his own platform just 5 years ago. Before Sendlane, Jimmy built and sold 2 businesses in digital marketing and e-commerce. It's a pleasure to have him. Enjoy my interview with Jimmy Kim. Jimmy, thanks so much for coming back over here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Always excited to be on these podcasts and really get to share and talk about, not only the journey on business, but also my personal journey and all that good stuff that comes into entrepreneurship and being a founder as well, too.
So much fun. And we have a similarity having grown up in Maryland, and we talked about that and a bunch of other fun stuff. So for today, I would love to start with before you started in business, right? Because you were in the affiliate marketing world, digital marketing for quite some time. But before you even started your first business, what were you doing?
So before my first business, I guess I can start kind of back, and I'll start back when I'm 16 because the story is very congruent. When I was 16, my first real the big boy job, I guess, more than what, I did pizzas and worked as a line cook before that. And then I went into the car business actually. And my first job that I felt like I actually had a real job was actually being a lot attendant, washing cars when I was 16 years old. And the story goes where it's basically like this. I was washing cars through the summer and school time and eventually was going off to college. And when I went off to college, I was coming back for winter breaks and summer breaks and coming back to wash cars for the summer because that's kind of what I knew and felt like that was a great way. And it paid a pretty good penny, I guess. I look back and I laugh. It was $8 an hour, but that was a good penny back then when I was thinking about it too as well, right? So I was getting $8 an hour and I was working there. And I came back one summer. I remember distinctly, it was after my sophomore year of school. I came back to school and I walked into the door and they were like, "Hey, welcome back, from summer and blah, blah, blah." And they gave me the hard news. They said, "Hey, we don't really need any lot attendants right now. We're actually overbooked and everything." And I was like, all right, well, I'll just go next door. See you all soon. I was in this auto park area. There was 20 dealerships there. So I was like, I'll just go next door. And as I was walking out, one of the senior sales guys who's kind of seen me there for the last 3 years, grabbed me in the parking lot and was like, "Hey, Jimmy," he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, I was like, "I'm going to go see if the next door neighbors over at the Subaru dealerships has an opening for washing cars." And he was like, "Well, you've been washing cars and you know the product quite well." He's like, "Why don't you come inside this summer? It's hot outside. Why don't you come in and just sell cars? I'm sure they'll give you a shot," right? And I was like, sounds like a thing. So I turned back around, walked back in and I said, "Hey, can I sell cars this summer?" And they're like, "Yeah, I can't see why not," right? And that's kind of how it all kind of started for me. And that's where I got into it. And what happened there was kind of incredible. Being green-eyed, bushy-tailed, I didn't know anything about sales. All I knew was I needed to talk to everybody. So I literally talked to everybody. It didn't matter if there's a 16-year-old kid looking at the Mustang or the 90-year-old man looking at the Mustang. I didn't care. I just talked to everybody. And that subsequently realized the first learning of sales that I learned, which was relationship. And I was able to form these great relationships with people. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, I had started to build this giant client base. Within the first 30 days of being in sales, I actually ended up being the salesman of the month the first month in, selling about 32 cars. And they just, beginner's luck, blah, blah, blah. So that only fired me and fueled me up as a person because I'm a competitive person. And I decided that I'm going to have to back that up. So I did it the second month. I did it the third month. And that also ultimately came into that hard talk that I had with my parents. So here I am making 14, 15 grand a month at the age of, I think I was 19 and a half years old right now, coming back from my sophomore year of college. And I went to him and said, "I want to take some time off." I said, "Let me take 6 months off and sell cars. Let me make money. Let me pay off my student loans. Let me get my feet established, build a savings, and I'll go back into school." Well, I did really well my first year. I paid off all my student loans, and I went back at the end of the year and I actually said, you know what? I know I'm enrolled in school to go back to school, but I don't want to go back. I want to continue selling cars and make money. Now, I'm from an Asian family. Anyone listening to this, if you've got any Asian background, you know how bad that conversation really went. I'm giving you the PG or the G version of that conversation. It was a very much more difficult conversation. Now, I grew up very as an independent person. So that was also the time that I decided that I'm going to completely move out of my house too as well, which ultimately killed my mother and like really hated that. But, you know, I knew that that was my next step and that was my personal journey. Now, what happened there from there is I was really ambitious in car sales and I was able to kind of drive my way up the ladder. I remember I jumped into, when I was 21, I actually went up and marched up. And the funny story is like this, and it's kind of a funny story, but I went up to my direct manager like I'm supposed to. And I said, hey, I want to keep learning. I'm really doing great in sales, but I want to learn the next step. And they're like, well, what's the next step? And I said, it's finance, right? So I said, I want to learn finance. I want to learn how to sell intangible products to people, sell them interest rates, convert them on insurances. I thought that was really cool. Well, the story goes, I told my manager and he goes up to, a couple days later, goes up to the top, which we had multiple stores. So he went to the top main store and he comes back and he says, the general manager, his name was Gary back then. And he was like, Gary told me that they don't have any positions open and we'd rather keep you in sales. Well, me being young and hot-headed and a little bit stupid, I actually marched up there angry because I'm like, I've been producing so much money for this company, like I should get a chance. And I ran up there and I confront Gary. Well, it turns out my manager never talked to Gary, which was always like the big problem there. And that put me in a state of embarrassment. And ultimately, I walked out at that point because I was so angry and hot-headed. I would never do that now today, but back then I was emotional about it. And I walked out and decided I don't want to be a part of this company because they're lying to me. Well, it wasn't even 15, 20 days. I was kind of partying and enjoying life. I had made all this money. I had been working so hard. I didn't even get to spend it yet. And all of a sudden, I get a call from the owner of the company. And they're like, Jimmy, where'd you go? What's going on? And I told them the story. Next thing I know, they're bringing me back in to work in a different department, said, sell cars for 3 more months under here, and I'll send you to Kansas to learn school. So Kansas and Overland Park is actually where a lot of these insurance companies are and where they'll teach you a lot of education. So I ended up flying to Kansas for 2-3 weeks and learning, getting my word tracks and continuing to go in, and I came back into finance. And so that was kind of how I ended up in finance, and I was doing that for a couple years. And then, you know, what would happen in finance is you become the secondary manager to the general manager or the sales manager. And anytime he was off or he was on vacation, I was in charge of the store or I was in charge of that location. And it taught me a lot. And I also ultimately loved the fact that like I really enjoyed managing people and helping them get deals over the edge. And though I did it naturally in finance, it just kind of got me excited. So I started doing a little bit more sales manager stuff. And then I started getting poached. And what happened was at the end, I got headhunted by another local company. And they came to me and said, hey, Jimmy, I want you to come one of these stores and hopefully become 3 stores eventually. I want you to come and sit as the general manager and kind of oversee the operations and the sales and all that stuff. So that was really fun. I jumped over to that opportunity when I was about 25 years old. So I became a general manager at 25. I ran a store by myself. It was really fun. Eventually running 2 other stores with it. They were Saturn stores, which was really great. And then ultimately in 2008, when General Motors went bankrupt, well, I kind of lost Saturn. And then I had the opportunity to reopen those stores again as Kia stores. And I didn't really feel like I wanted to be in that space. At that time, I was getting really interested in digital marketing and online stuff. And I've always been entrepreneurial. Even when I look back in college and when I was younger, before I even had my first job, I was always finding ways to make money. I was the guy who shoveled the snow, the guy who had the lawn mowing service as kids, the guy who sold lemonade. I mean, I did a little of everything. In college, during my school year, I even invented a little product for cars that I thought would be a really cool way to fund my own car project. So I invented something that was a needed necessity in the marketplace, sold that to fuel my hobby. And that's how I actually souped up my car when I was young. And of course, it was dumb back then, but it was what made me happy back then, right? So at that time when the car dealership thing was blowing up, I actually knew a guy named Anik Singal. And he was my friend. He was my neighbor. We were friends. We went to Vegas. We partied. But we really didn't know. Had no idea what he was doing online. And at that time, he had a lot of issues in his business. He was running a 80-person business, huge operations, big office in Maryland and big office in India. And ultimately, I found out that due to his lack of operational skill, that he just had a lot of things happening inside the business. And I remember having this talk. He had just come back from India. He was a little upset about things. He had came over. He had bought me a hookah. So this was back when hookahs weren't even a thing, back in like 2008. And he brought me a hookah from India and was like, dude, I got this hookah thing. Let's smoke it and let's hang out. So I didn't even know what it was. So I was like, we need to go to my garage and smoke it in my garage because I don't want my house to smell, all that good stuff. And we ended up, we were just sitting there puffing in our garage, just talking about life. And I was like, man, I'm burnt out. I'm tired. I want to do something different. Here's my skill set. What do you think I could do? And he's like, hey, why don't you just come work for me? And I was like, yeah, okay. And I said, and we made this agreement up front. I said, I'm going to work for you as long as I need to A, get you organized, B, get you out of debt in your company, and C, that I feel like I've learned it. And then I'm going to go off and do my own thing. So we had that agreement up front, which is really important. And so that's what we did. So for the next 3 years, he taught me everything about digital marketing, from copywriting to marketing, to even understanding a little bit more on the sales side of things, to me helping him with the operational side and so forth. And after 3 years, I exited that company and moved on from there. And that led me ultimately to my first company. So my first company was kind of like a content creator slash software company. It was a little bit mix of both because I was so heavily involved in both sides. I learned early on that I love to automate things. Like I love to take something that I'm doing manually and automate it. And that was my way of creating solutions of software. So instead of going out there and just creating something out of some idea, I literally took processes that I'm doing in my business, automated, that I felt like other entrepreneurs like myself could actually relate to. And that's kind of what we did with that company for years. And during that time, I actually ended up investing into an e-commerce store slash retail store in Las Vegas through a loan that I gave them initially that became me becoming a managing partner of the company. And that was also my other fun thing, which actually ultimately led me to move out west from Maryland. So that's how I ended up moving out west from Maryland to Las Vegas initially, because I had an opportunity, because I had invested big money into a company so that we can grow that company. And so at the same time, and it was also really interesting to me to kind of jump into another sector of my life. And though I understood digital and content, I wanted to get back into a little bit more of that sales type environment. And so that's where I came to. And then during all that time, what was really fun was when the e-commerce store was starting to kick off, my content creator world software company was kicking off, we discovered a big problem with email. Basically, the companies that were using the legacy companies, I don't need to name names on the show, but basically you guys know the companies that have been around for years, and they really didn't understand digital marketing. They actually didn't understand e-commerce that well. They didn't understand the idea of selling online. Their idea of email marketing was you have a brand, a brick and mortar, and you sell to those people, or you create the list and you connect with those people, where I was sitting there going, hey, we have a completely digital front and don't have the typical customer access or POS systems in place. So no one could really truly understood that. And we said, you know what, let's go ahead and develop our own. At this point, I was deep into software. My partners were deep into software, and we're like, let's just create our own and automate it. So that's what we did. So initially, what was really fun about this whole story is that now I'm running 3 different things. I'm running Sendlane, I'm running my content creator software company, and then I'm running my e-commerce company. And, they were all pretty successful doing things, obviously not Sendlane, but the other two. And we're kind of fueling the growth of this company. And Sendlane came into picture because it actually didn't start as Sendlane. It actually started as a product called Targetly, is what we actually initially called it. And then, it was 2014, we started getting people kind of like you, Nicole, or like other people that are like in the space and market and kind of seeing what we're doing, and started asking us like, hey, what are you guys doing? What tool are you guys using? Can you share with us how you're doing that? And it kind of turned the wheels, and we're like, you know what? Let's put it out a front-facing website and see what happens. And we laugh at our front-facing website. We were just analyzing it a couple weeks ago, and we're laughing. Things were misspelled. There was still that Lori Sum text on there. There was so much stuff broken in there, but because of our network and connections, it allowed us to continue to bring people in sales. I actually remember our first sale to the day still. It was actually when we opened beta first on it was April 20th, obviously 420 being like a funny number, but it was literally April 20th. Our first customer came into the door and paid us for it. And that was when we were in beta launch. And I remember that was our first, and it kind of validated like, hey, we've got something here. And that's kind of how it all started off. Now,
and that was 2014 or 2015?
That was 2014. Yeah, 2014. And then we opened publicly in 2015. So in 2014, we were just promoting it to our internal audience. And in 2015, we started taking off. In 2015, I realized I needed to fuel the company. So what I did was I actually created a course for email marketers and content creator world. I fueled that product. It was from my other company. And I said, you know what? I'm going to teach them Sendlane inside of there. And I'm going to teach them why we're better. And basically, I was able to take 22,000 people over a 6-month period to buy this course on email marketing from me. And basically from there, I was fueling Sendlane. And that's the kind of how Sendlane grew initially and grew into the world of being an email marketing company. So that's kind of how we—
Jimmy, I think I bought that program. I think that's how I first learned about Sendlane.
Yeah, that might be exactly it.
Because that was like right when I was starting my business and trying to learn everything in the online space.
Yeah.
And I went through some funnel, and of course I didn't know what that was back then, but yeah, I did. I took your course, I think. And then I got Sendlane. Like it was like, I was totally not ready for it, but now it's a whole different animal. Jimmy, You were about to tell us more about where you guys are at today with Sendlane.
Sure. So I'll kind of back up just 3 seconds there and then come into it. So where it gets really even more interesting for me was it was 2017 and it was August of 2017 and my first daughter was born. And that really gave me a reality check into life. I realized that two things. I've got someone I'm responsible for now. And two, I realized that I was kind of working too hard, meaning like I was spread so thin trying to make all these businesses grow, even though they were doing $5, $7, $10 million a year each. I realized that it wasn't about the money at this point. It was about myself and my availability. So I actually made a decision to sell everything and I sold all my other two companies, but both my other two companies. So I pieced together or parted ways with different parts of the business over on the content creator side. And then my e-commerce side, I sold back to my partner through a deal to make sure that he can continue to run it and operate it and all that stuff. And I jumped all into Sendlane. And then that's when we kind of propelled and took off at that point. And then we ran all the way to December of 2018, where we raised our first venture capital for the company. So we brought in a couple $1 million into the company. Investors believed in our growth and numbers, and they gave us a bunch of money. And then here today, now we continue to grow, and we've made a very big core vertical shift inside of the company as well too. We're focused on e-commerce now, and that's kind of where we see the future of the world. As you're already seeing, I'm sure, Nicole, as well, a lot of content creators are becoming e-commerce owners, supplement owners, kind of mixing the hybrid of it. And I've realized even myself that being a content creator and learning how that side works really helped me fuel even the e-commerce side a lot, because it's something that e-commerce owners don't have. So our product here today is an email marketing automation platform for e-commerce businesses foremost. Obviously, we still serve content creators because we've got our native integrations, things like ClickBank and ClickFunnels and all the big ones that are out there. And then, of course, we also do a lot of deep integrations to e-commerce platforms like Shopify, WooCommerce, Viva, Magento, BigCommerce, all those companies as we continue to like kind of dive through that side. So that's where we are here today as a business. We're serving a little over 5,000 customers here today. Our platform is all about, it's kind of like the graduation story. So we like to say that you graduate from one of our competitors on the lower level scale and you move up. You don't pay a ton more money, but you get the features and functionalities that you typically get in an enterprise grade platform. So that's what makes this really unique, and really special. And then the biggest thing that I really layered on from learnings back in 2011 from a book called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, I really put forth the effort of making sure that customer service or customer centric attitude in our business. And that's also why we ultimately have some amazing stats. And like, if you look at any reviews about us, the number one review you'll see about it is it's insane customer support, because we believe that we have to serve our businesses. So currently to this day, we operate a 33-second first response time, 24/7, 365 right now. So, and most of it's done out of San Diego. We do have a little team in Romania as well too, but almost all of it is out of San Diego as well too.
So cool. So cool. And we put something together, I believe, at the NicoleHolland.com/Sendlane for folks from my audience who want to check that out. But I want to make sure that people know how to connect with you beyond this interview, and as well, anything else you haven't shared that you would like to pass on. For example, your best advice to business owners who are looking to follow in your footsteps.
I'll start with that, and then I'll get into how you contact me, just because that is a good place that I like to think about. There's a lot of things that I can give advice around, but the one thing that I think I look back as like, as I hit my 40-year-old mark, and I'm like, looking back as my entrepreneurship journey, the biggest thing I can tell you is focus. Think about focus as one of the biggest drivers of your business. When you're thinking about it, I'm not talking about, focus on the one project. I'm talking about focus on your business. I know it's really easy to get swayed by shiny objects left and right. It's really easy to think that you can start 4 or 5 businesses. But, ultimately, if I look back at myself, my biggest number one regret is I didn't go all in on Sendlane earlier in my company and world. I had the idea, I had the thought. I just wasn't trusting of myself that I could do that. And if I would have done this 2-3 years before I actually dove all in 2017, and I really started diving in 2015, I think the company story would be even more crazy than it is already. And I think that that's something that's really hard to overcome, because it's shiny objects to entrepreneurs are one of the most difficult things to kind of overcome. But when you're able to kind of put on your blinders, get a little bit of tunnel vision, and really focus on that and keep your eyes on the prize of what your goals are, that's literally and ultimately my number one advice that I can give any founder out there is just don't get muddled and tied up into what everybody else is doing. Work on what you're doing. And then second to that is my second piece of advice is like find other founders. Don't find other founders to be connected with, because you will go through a journey of emotions from the ups and downs that come into place. Yeah, you may only see the ups and the ups when you're kind of talking to a lot of people, but truth and reality is there was a great thing that I saw on LinkedIn I was laughing about. It was like founder says, oh, business is great, means business is terrible. Means, oh, things are great, but there's issues. Business is okay, but things are happening and they're trying to get through it. Business is horrible, closing tomorrow. Like founders will always be optimists and always be overly optimists about their own business. But the truth and reality is you need that support of that network around you. And I'm not talking about like your employees or your local friends. I'm talking about other founders as well too. So leading to that, for me, if you're looking to find me, I'm pretty wide open and available. It's not very hard to find me. Obviously, my email, jk@sendlane.com. That's how you directly connect with me. Secondary to that, if you wanted to find me on like Twitter or Instagram, which are the two places that I really live outside of it, outside of LinkedIn, of course, that you'll find me easily by typing my name in, is I think it's at Real Jimmy Kim. So Real JIMMYKIM for my Twitter and my Instagram. And I generally share more personal stuff there. I'm not a person that just goes out and sprays a lot of business stuff. So I'm more personal to follow, but I won't really be sharing much in the business world. So but you can email me and I'll be happy to talk about anything you want. I just like to keep that side for my kind of my personal branding, I guess. In retrospect, I don't like to talk about business out in the public as much as I do when I'm on like things like this podcast. So hopefully I answered the question.
Definitely answered the question. That was great advice. And one of the things I just want to mention, you talked about the testimonials about customer service, but I love that you're not out there marketing in your personal connections. Like you're a real person. And also how much Sendlane invests in real people being real people. It's just something we didn't talk about today, what that customer service looks like, and that it is human beings people get 24/7. And yeah, so I just wanted the culture that you guys have over at Sendlane that's so personal and so high touch is really impressive to me. And so I just wanted to say that before thanking you and also letting our listeners know, well, thank you to them too, for everybody who's been with us.
Thank you for having me. Always exciting to be on anything to talk about these things, but especially your show. I really like your show as well too. So thank you for that.
Thanks again to Jimmy for being my guest on today's show and for sharing his founder's journey with us. We've got links for you to connect directly with Jimmy, the resources we discussed, plus the full transcript of this episode and more at fascinatingfounders.com. Remember that successful people surround themselves with successful people. And until next time, this is Nicole Holland signing off.